Good afternoon and welcome to the sixth and last session of This is Film Heritage in Practice. My name is Giovanna Fossati. I'm the Chief Curator of iFilm Museum and Professor Film Heritage and Digital Film Culture at the University of Amsterdam. It's great to see a full house for this last session. Since 2015, iFilm Museum collaborates with the University of Amsterdam and the Amsterdam School for Cultural Analysis on the series This is Film, which is also a class offered to master students at the university. This year we have 30 students with us and they help introducing our guests and asking them questions. The sessions are recorded and they will be made available online in a few weeks on the YouTube channel, where you can also find the past two editions of This is Film. We started This is Film 8 years ago because we felt that what happens behind the screens of a film archive is still quite unknown to the general audience. Throughout the 6 sessions, we discuss how films are collected, preserved, and restored with the aim of stimulating a curiosity that goes beyond what is offered in cinemas and on streaming platforms. Also, we hope to promote a critical discussion about what has been collected and preserved and what has been lost and why. Besides This is Film, there are other programs that have been initiated by iFilm Museum to promote the activation or reactivation of the film archive from different and novel perspectives. One of them is the annual International Conference. The 8th edition of the conference focuses on the theme Activating the Archive, which has also been the overarching theme for this year, This is Film series. Between the 4th and the 7th of June, we are looking forward to welcoming more than 70 speakers from around the world who will discuss how audiovisual archives can stimulate people to engage with specific social and political causes, support the efforts of activists, or be used as communal resources through global and local projects and collaborations from inside and outside institutional archives. If you are interested, the program is posted online and registration are open. Also on Saturday, June the 3rd, we host the annual event Meet the Archive. Throughout the day, ICE curators and restorers will talk about their latest projects with subjects including film censorship, the forgotten works of early female filmmakers, and the reuse of film excerpts from ICE collection in new artworks. The evening program, which also marks the opening of the International Conference, will present a brand new restoration of the title, a title from the Cinemin collection, Donna, Women in Revolt, made in 1980 by Yvonne Scholten. The film, which impressively portrays 80 years of women's resistance in Italy, will be also discussed by our guests today. Admission to Meet the Archive on June 3, including the evening screening, is free. So if you'd like to participate, feel free to collect a ticket from the box office on the day itself. Today, we will focus on the collection of Dutch activist films produced in the 1970s and 80s with 3 guests, Senior Curator Rommy Albers and former trainees Carolina Battaglini and Martine Bouw. We will also discuss the recent restoration of one of such films, the documentary Waar de Ratten koning zijn, Where the Rats Are Kings, made in 1985 by Barbara den Uyl, documenting the squatters' culture in the Amsterdam neighborhood Stadsliedenbuurt. I hear that Barbara den Uyl, the director, is here with us today. We are really happy and honored to have her. Is she really here? Yes, there she is. So before giving the word to our guests, just a few words about the traineeship program that I started in 2017, a program that since 2021 is supported by the Giske Strebis Fonds and the Hendrik Müllers Fonds. So the traineeships are designed to educate a new generation of film restorers and film collection specialists. The program aims at bridging the theoretical knowledge provided by academic training with the hands-on daily practices in a film archive. And it seeks to facilitate the transition into the labor market. These are paid positions that provide a part-time on-the-job training for 10 months under the guidance of experienced curators, restorers, scanning operators, and collection specialists who deal with the management and preservation of both analog and digital collections. The program offers two positions, one as a film restoration trainee and one and the film restoration trainee focuses on various aspects of analog and digital restoration processes. And the second one is film collection trainee, focusing on collection management and or film curatorship. The call for a new edition of the traineeship will be published soon. Today, we are very proud that two of our former trainees, who are now colleagues working in the film archival field, are with us for this last session of This is Film. And now I would like to introduce Noah Benjamins, Luz van Keulen, Elia Meregalli, Thijs Snathorst, Violeta Rodriguez Lopez, and Magdalena Stefan, who are students of the This is Film class. And on behalf of the group, Noah and Magdalena will introduce our guests, and Noah will be the first.
Okay, so I will introduce both Rommy Albers and Martine Bouw. Rommy Albers is an Amsterdam-based curator, scholar and researcher, expert in the field of film history and archiving, archival studies, museum studies, and cultural heritage. After graduating in architecture studies at the University of Delft, he studied art history. He studied art history at the University of Utrecht and the University of Leiden. Before he started working at I, at that time still called the Netherlands Film Museum, he worked as a curator at a festival focused on experimental film and electronic art. Rommy Albers occupied the position of researcher at the I Film Institute for more than 15 years, from 1917 to 1997 to 2013, and is currently the senior curator for the Dutch film collection at this institution, additionally acting as a collection specialist for Dutch film and cinema culture. In this role, he has worked to disclose several archival collections, such as the Cineclub collection in cooperation with the International Institute for Social History and the University of Amsterdam. Alongside his fundamental involvement and collaboration at the museum, Rommy Albers is also, as mentioned, a scholar, researcher, and film historian, and as such, he has authored, co-authored, and edited several books, such as Film in Nederland, Jean Desmet's Droomfabriek, de avontuurlijke jaren van de film, en Tussen de filmrollen. Martine Bouw is an access employee at Cinematheque, the Cinematheque Royale de Belgique in Brussels, Belgium. Additionally, she works as a programmer and researcher at the Netherlands Silent Film Festival in Eindhoven, the biggest film festival in the Netherlands in the field of silent film, proving a keen interest in providing access to cinematic material and materiality. In the Curator's Choice section, in particular, the festival brings the public historically and artistically relevant silent films, often overlooked by the public. After completing her education at the University of Antwerp, where she received her bachelor and master in language and literature and film and theater, she graduated from the Preservation and Presentation of the Moving Image MA here in Amsterdam, created in collaboration with the iFilm Museum. In 2021 and 2022, Martine Bouw was selected and completed for the traineeship here in film collection at the iFilm Museum, where she collaborated with fellow guest Carolina Battaglini. At Martine Bouw additionally acted as a digital film registrar, booker, documentarist, and digital ingest specialist. She participated in different projects about film collection, restoration, and access.
Our third guest today is Carolina Battaglini. She's an interdisciplinary artist and archivist interested in community-driven archive practices. She studied cinematography at the ENERC Film Academy, the National School of Film Experimentation and Production in Buenos Aires, followed by the Film Preservation Master's course at the Elias Querejeta Cine Escola in San Sebastián. There she worked on a research titled Towards a Public Activism Archive in Argentina, gathering information of Argentinian autonomous organizations that hold video evidence, video testimony, and state violence-related material. This was accompanied by a sister project studying the bond between dance and protest archiving practices. She has worked as a cinematographer on drama and documentary short films such as Bushra and Hotel Recuerdo in 2016, Remanso in 2017, and Adonde Quieras in 2018. In 2021, Carolina was the film restoration trainee at iFilm Museum, where the final project consisted in the digital restoration of Waar de Rat en Koning zijn by Barbara den Uyl, which we will see today. Other projects include being part of the 2021 digital subcommittee from the Association of Moving Image Archivists Education Task Force, as well as being part of the editor's team of a publication that preserves the work of Annabelle Nicholson. Please join us to welcome Martine, Rommy, and Carolina.
Okay, welcome again. One short remark. I did study architecture, but I never graduated, so that's one. Although I did graduate at art history. So the 70s, 80s. A couple of years ago, we already started with the investigation of the collection of the Cineclub Vrijheidsfilm, an organization which started in 1966 in presenting socio-critical and activist films in the Netherlands, both from abroad as their own productions, and that grow and grow and grow. And in the 70s, there were a lot of film collectives and distributors who showed that films in special events, not in the cinemas, but some in the film houses, on universities, etc. Martina will talk more about it. But we thought it would be a good idea to go in depth in that period. We have a lot of films in our archive on 60 millimeter. Sometimes we have the negatives, most of the times not. You have already heard about the Sicilian films we have in our collection a couple of weeks ago. We try to investigate it and try to find our way in that huge pile of films and documents, because it's not only film, it's also a lot of documents about the screening, about the production of those films, and they're divided over different archives, so we have to cooperate with different archives also. We thought, being this very big project, we start with a very small pilot, or it's not a small pilot, but with a pilot, which is the Amsterdam Stadsjournaal, Amsterdam's newsreels, a collective which made films in Amsterdam in the 70s, from 74 till 84. Again, Martina will talk about that. And Barbara den Uyl was part of that collective. So this film was made, her first film after she left the Amsterdam Stadsjournaal, or the Amsterdam Stadsjournaal stopped making films. I will not talk about the film itself. I will tell you something about squatting in the Netherlands, because I think it's also good to know something more about squatting. Then it's far more than you see in the film. The film is a very good example of showing what squatting is in the 80s, but squatting already started 20 years before that. So I think it's a good idea to have an idea of what squatting is in the Netherlands. And it maybe started the whole story just after the Second World War. There was a big shortage of houses in the Netherlands, and the government developed large-scale plans to build houses in the Netherlands. So you see in the suburbs of the big cities, there were a lot of new aerial districts of residential districts built. On the other hand, you see the small villages near the cities were turned into commuters' villages, so people living there and then going to the inner city to work there. And of course, there was the new towns, places which were developed or newly built, like Almere, for an overflow of the people living in Amsterdam to live in the city of Almere and to work in Amsterdam again or work there. But you see that the Netherlands changed a lot. And in the 70s, we thought, okay, or the government thought, we're finished the job. There's enough houses in the Netherlands, but they were wrong, of course, on two sides. One was they built a lot of houses outside the city, but the cities itself were problems. There were impoverished neighborhoods. If you see the Staatsliedenbuurt or the Jordaan in the 60s, there are images of it, and it is a totally different world with lots of rundown houses, vacant houses. So they worked, and the stad renewal plans, renovation plans, sometimes with the inhabitants of the neighborhoods itself were in committees, and sometimes also with squatters, because at that time there was already squatting in the Netherlands. And squatting was maybe the other problem they had. They built houses for families. The family was still the cornerstone of Dutch society, so they built houses for parents and two or three children. But they never thought that there was another kind of demand on houses. And that started maybe in the 60s on big scale, because at that time there was a kind of youth revolution, or the youth became very important. It became, of course, an economical target group. The youth were the people who bought the records, went on holidays, there was fashion, so there were an economical target group, and there was also a lot of investment in youth in the way that the minimum wages were started in 1986. The student financing became much more better in the 1950s. So they could study, they wanted to liberate, they wanted to take part in the emancipation and democratization of the society. So we see that they were a new group with new demands, and they also wanted to have their own houses. And that was the problem. There were a lot of houses, but most houses were built for families and were too expensive for young people and starters, like now. So one of the first things which already started in the mid-60s was the squatting of houses. It started with Provo, a bit of playful revolutionary group in Amsterdam who started squatting houses in Amsterdam, and that went on in the 60s. And in the beginning of the 70s, there was the National Squatting Day. On the 5th of May, 1970, it was Liberation Day in the Netherlands, and they turned it into National Squatting Day, and we have a short film about that day. You can start the film. It started with people coming from the Liberation Market, which was on the Spui, and then they went to the Herengracht. And in the Herengracht, they squatted a house, which was, the owner was a bank in Amsterdam, and it was for speculation, because that's what was a real big problem in those days. There was a lot of speculation. They wanted to turn the inner cities in very financial flourishing parts with hotels, with office buildings, and not with houses and so on. So they went. Of course, they were waiting, but nothing changed. So the police evicted the building, of course. The police evicted the building. Some of the squatters were jailed for a couple of days. But it happened also in Arnhem, in Amersfoort, in Haarlem. So over the whole of the Netherlands, there was squatting. And what happened the next year was that there came a new law on housebreaking. Housebreaking was no longer forbidden, and the right of housing was put above the house of ownership. So you could squat, and you could, if you put a chair, a bed, and a table in the house, you could say, okay, I live there, it's my home. Of course, the politicians thought, okay, that's too far, so they tried to have new squatting laws in the Netherlands, but due to the politics where some parties say, okay, we are sympathetic to the squatting, due to the fact that the squatters would work together with a lot of people in committees about city restoration, city renovation, had that sympathy from a big part of the people in the Netherlands. They were tolerated for a long time until the late 80s, or late 70s, sorry. Then it changed and it became more hardened and hardened. They had another way of saying, okay, we don't say it is housebreaking, but it's disruption of the public order. So police and later ook squads were put together by the owners of the building, started to attack the or to try to evict the people who were in the squatting areas. And squatting became more and more a violent struggle with police and with the authorities. And that's what happened in the second generation. So the first generation of squatters was working together for a long time with people, with sometimes also with city councils. In the second generation, you see that squatters became more and more their own subculture. So, and more they reacted the state as in where they live, and they were a state within the state. And of course, after the beginning of 1980, with the riots at the Vondelstraat and the riots at the inauguration during the Queen's Day, when Queen Beatrix was inaugurated, they lost a lot of sympathy. There was still sympathy for squatting, but there was no sympathy and more longer for the squatters itself, and they became more and more isolated and turned into their own subculture. And in the films of Barbara den Uyl, you see that she gives a portrait of that new subculture. And in both of her films, she filmed people who were in that new subculture of squatters in their own world. The first one, you see that they're young squatters, they're part of naive. They're looking for a house in the film. Even the parents of one of the squatters comes and say they are happy that her child has found a house now and is living somewhere. In the second film, you see where the kings are, where the rats are king. You see much more that it is more, rebellious and more. They're looking for the confrontation. They say, okay, this is our state, and we don't recognize the state itself. There's a tribunal because the mayor of Amsterdam wanted to come to the Staatsliedenbuurt, and they have a tribunal to say, okay, he can only comes there if he does some concessions. He does that, and you see the kind of different attitudes between the squatters and the council, and in between them there's the outpost official, and he is a very difficult way because he is there as official from the city itself, and he has to deal with the squatters, and you see that he's much more sympathizing, that he's understanding what the squatters want. Only he is part of the system they're fighting against. That's briefly what's squatting about. It's much more to tell. This is very short introduction about squatting in the Netherlands. The other thing I wanted to say is a few words about what changed in the film infrastructure in the Netherlands in the early 70s. The Dutch film industry, of the Dutch cinema industry, was dominated by the Nederlandse Bioscoopbond, the Dutch cinema union. What was a kind of cartel in which distributors and exhibitors worked together, and you could only deal with members. So there was no way that anyone other could come into that circle of people working together. It was very profitable for the Dutch cinema. They could say, okay, there are just two cinemas in this city. We don't want a third cinema, because if a distributor is giving films or renting films to that third cinema, he will be excluded from the union, so he couldn't rent films to the other cinemas also. So that would be his faillissement, or his. So in that way, it was dominated by that union. And in the whole field of democratization and liberation and emancipation, a lot of young filmmakers and a lot wanted to have more freedom. There were writing. Some of them were in the board of Screen, which was a magazine, a film magazine, and they started to protest against that, cartel of the Nederlands film, of the Nederlandse Bioscoopbond, and they started their own infrastructure. They had their own film houses, they had their own distribution, and it all on 60 millimeters. So next to the official cinema, it became a second infrastructure of places where you could see films, and where it was also possible for people to show their own films on 60 millimeter. It was quite easy and a lot cheaper to make. And so there was a second part of Dutch film culture, which was much more related to what was going on in that time. And there you see that all those film collectives, all those socio-critical films, all those activistic films were shown, and not only in those film houses, but you can also show them, of course, at schools, at universities, at union buildings, at youth clubs. So there was a completely new infrastructure, and that was very important for the flourishing and development of the activistic films in the 70s and 80s. Now Martine will tell you something more about Amsterdam Stadsjournaal and Barbara den Uyl.
Hi, so as Rommy already started to explain, the societal changes of the 1960s and 70s required a different type of films, a different approach to exhibiting them, and also a different way of collaborating, of making them together. The establishment of the free circuit gave rise to a lot of new film collectives and other organizations, which brought the fight for democratization and emancipation to the world of film. Starting in 1966 until about 1974, many film collectives and activist distribution companies such as Cineclub Vrijheidsfilm, de Kritische Filmers, de Rode Lantaarn, Cinemien, and Amsterdam Stadsjournaal were founded within this spirit. They came from different parts of the country, were often founded by students or recent graduates coming from very different backgrounds, such as sociology or engineering, but sometimes they also had a cinema background as well. They often had a different origin and a different focus, but also had a lot of commonalities. They saw what was happening in the world, and they all wanted to contribute to that, to do something, to change something. And they saw cinema as their tool to create a change. They saw cinema as a weapon, which also refers to the slogan of Cineclub Vrijheidsfilm. You can see the logo, a very efficient logo at the top of the slides. So cinema as a weapon, as a tool to create change, to communicate a message. As you can see, they use a quite direct and very literal film language sometimes. The message is definitely not to be misunderstood. Their main focus was not necessarily aesthetic quality or technical prowess, accomplishments to create high art or popular entertainment. They really worked from within their process from certain principles or at least at the beginning, like later in the movement, it changed a little bit. But they were really focused on equality, on collectively working, on the spirit of solidarity. There was no strict hierarchy. There were no individual credits even. The collective was often cited as the sole creator of the film, even though many people had specific parts within that collective. They were not credited. They had a specific target audience in mind as well. So they, in the spirit of participation, they didn't just started to make films themselves. They also collaborated with organizations that were involved in the struggle and in the topics that they were making their films about. Their filmmaking process, so definitely not necessarily for the people, but also with the people. Their process of filmmaking can sometimes be described as a bit bric-a-brac. So you just take what you have and you start shooting, and you see what is possible within those means that are available. No need for fancy equipment. The rise of 16mm made all of this possible. So it was cheaper, it was easier to handle. They could start shooting outside, were a lot more mobile, and this allowed them to get a lot closer to the action and to go to different locations, talk to the people, and engage with these topics in a very different way. Stylistically, sometimes they're very basic, but also super effective. The most important thing about many of these films is the message. So lots of talking heads, lots of voiceovers, things that sometimes are considered as not very interesting, but nevertheless brought the message across very clearly. They often had a specific point of view, which was informed by political theory, and depending on the group, they would also blend documentary filmmaking with fictionalized elements and reenacting situations to give you a different point of view on the issue, to really clearly act out what they wanted to say. Once the film was done, it was often first shown in art house cinemas, and after that, they went straight to their target audience. So they traveled all across the country to do small screenings at universities, feminist organizations, schools, community centers, libraries, anything you can think of, they were there. The idea referring to the slogan of Amsterdam's Filmjournaal, which is een poging om film weer onder de mensen te brengen. So bringing the films back among the people. Their goal was to start a discussion, to educate people, to create awareness, and basically to change the world. Not the form, but the content is key. Film is just a means to an end that they had available to bring that message across. Nevertheless, they're often extremely engaging films. They can be very creative, tend to be a little bit preachy sometimes, but also incredibly inspiring and engaging, and just an absolute call to action. So there is an insane amount of urgency that you see in the films when you watch them. They basically scream to be seen. They are still discussing topics that are very important even until this day. Topics like unemployment, abortion, colonialism, nuclear weapons, pollution, housing, all of these topics, I think we still recognize in the news today or in our discussions with our family or our friends. So, and at the same time, there are also a very interesting portrait of Dutch society in the 70s and the 80s. So just to highlight one collective in particular, Amsterdam Stadsjournaal was a film collective that was operational between 74 and 84. They made 36 films in total, each between 10 and 80 minutes. They originated from a group of Film Academy students, which had previously also founded the film magazine Screen, which is a leftist film magazine, very interested in political cinema and interested in discussing political theory and applying that to cinema. They kind of spawned a lot of incredibly talented filmmakers who are sometimes still filming today. A lot of directors, editors, camera people. Some of the people who were involved in Amsterdam Stadjournaal also created the production company Studio Nieuwe Gronden, which still exists today. And they had many similarities to other collectives, as I explained before, but the thing that really made them stand apart was their background as filmmakers coming from the Film Academy and really looking into this political theory and engaging with that and looking at the issues they were discussing from that point of view. So one of the filmmakers of Amsterdam Stadjournaal was Barbara den Uyl. She was born in 1949 in Amsterdam. And I just want to sketch a little bit her background because it is very relevant. So her parents are Joop den Uyl, who was a Dutch politician from the PvdA party, which is a party, let's say, on the left of the spectrum, and was Prime Minister of the Netherlands from 1973 until 1977. Her mother was Lisbeth van Wessem, an activist, publisher, writer, and also PvdA politician. She studied Dutch language and linguistics and also took some directing and acting courses at the Theatre Academy, and was a teacher for 6 years, after which in 1978 she joined Amsterdam Stadjournaal, at first as a scriptwriter and a director and a directing and production assistant, and later as a film director in her own right. Her first film for the collective was Amsterdam Stadjournaal number 28, called Chaos in de Rechtsstaat, which is a film about the squatters movements. And her second film is Amsterdam Stadjournaal number 34, Hoeveel uur ging u naar school? So how many hours did you go to school? Which is about an alternative education system within Amsterdam. So her next films were distributed by the successor of Amsterdam Stadjournaal, Yuka Films. And then in 1987, she founded her own production company, Van der Hoop Film Productions, together with Lee van den Berg. Looking at the topics in her films, a few threads stand out, such as education. She made a few portraits of artists, and also a few films about activism and the squatters movement. So the very first film that she made about the squatters movement was still while she was working with Amsterdam Stadjournaal, called Chaos in de Rechtsstaat in 1981. In this film, she really asked the question, who are these squatters? She mostly focuses on one house, Huizen Chaos, and follows their lives, gives a very observational portrait of who they are, what they do, the evictions that happen, and also some police confrontations. But in general, it's a very sympathetic image of the squatters who she portrays. The second film I would like to discuss is the film We'll See Tonight, Waar de ratten koning zijn, which she made right after the end of Amsterdam Stadsjournaal and was distributed by the successor Yuka Film. In the film, you see squatting as a subculture, you see youth culture, you see punk culture, and it just focuses on one area of the city, the Staatsliedenbuurt, which was at the time considered as the worst or one of the worst parts of Amsterdam, and where people sort of created their own free states within the city, even up until the point where they kicked out the mayor when he came to visit the area because he was not welcome there. So in the film, she shows different types of activism and shows you, these frictions, shows you how the squatters and the municipality are not even talking anymore, they're not communicating, and because they dig themselves in so much, that's how all of these clashes happen. She spent months and months and months filming everything that was happening in the area. But then only a few weeks after the filming stopped, catastrophic eviction happened in the area. And in the end, one of the squatters died in a prison cell, which was absolutely shocking to the community. You will see all of that later. Then, right after that, in 1987, she made the film Onder het Blijveisel, in which she really reflects on the purpose and the use of activism and freedom fighters. She asked the question, how far can you go with activist actions, and where do you draw the line? And in this film, she also references the death of Hans Kok, who is the squatter who died in the prison cell. And then the final film in 1991 is in Naam der Wet, in which she mixes documentary and fiction elements. And really the whole film long is showing you an investigation into the death of Hans Kok, of this squatter. This film was produced by her own production company, Van der Hoop Productions, and was distributed by Cinemin, the feminist film collective, that also distributed Donna, the film that is playing next week. Throughout all of these films, Den Uyl shows different perspectives and changing views on squatting, and the changes that happen within the movement themselves. So as a whole, they're very interesting to see the portrait of the cities, of these neighborhoods, of these people, how people living in those areas are reacting to them, how the government is reacting to them, and how all of these shifts keep on shifting. So up next is Carolina, who will tell you more about the restoration process of the film.
We began the restoration, of course, by inspecting the material that we had available. This was an AV reel with a reversal copy, which was the original material used in camera to shoot the film. The other material we had was the print copy, which comes from this original material. Short explanation, just in case. The AV reel means it's a way of putting together the original shots, which sorry, got a bit lost. It works like this. Basically, the A reel contains the first shot and the B reel contains the second, and so on. And this is done so that you don't get the splice showing up in the end result. On another side, also the sound came from magnetic stripe that was in the print copy. And the big thing here was that we only had the first part of the film in AV original material. So there already was like the first challenge of the restoration. And in the print we had the complete film. So what I did first was comparing the two materials in the viewing tables, which, sorry, first I'll tell you a bit about this. This was found in the AV can, and it's basically color grading information, which is used to do the print with the original material. And this just tells the operator which light values to put in to do any corrections that the filmmakers want to do. And this was very valuable to have for not only as a document of the production, but also for doing our color correction at the end of the process. And so with the inspection, I saw that the material was in great state, fortunately, and I did an extensive damage report, mostly extensive in the for the original material, the AV reel, which there you can see a little bit to have an idea of what I will have to do after in the digital restoration at the end after the digitization. And I'll show you a little bit. This was like when I was comparing the two materials in the viewing tables, and I could already see that there was a big loss of information in the highlights and shadows in the print copy. Also, the print copy, just short acceleration, the print copy is also called the projection copy. So it was used, of course, to screen. And as Martine was telling us before, I'm sure this was screened many, many times. Therefore, the difference in damage and quality, definition, not quality. And so another thing I noticed is the difference in color, and this is due also to the small corrections that were done going from the original material to the projection copy. Some more images. Another difference between the two materials is that, as you can see, so it's a bit, ideally it will be other way around, but that one is original camera material and this one is projection copy. So this one comes from that one, and you can see the same damage is copied into this film, but it's less strong because surely there was some use of wet gate in the printing process, which is basically filling the film with liquid so that the damage is not so noticeable, basically, to make it very short. But on another side, even though the original damage was less noticeable, the projection was still more damage because of all the use that was given, and it had a lot of more scratches, more damage in general, but a lot of scratches mainly. So also you can see here, here you can see a lot the difference in color. It was way warmer, the original. So there we go to digitization. So after comparing and showing what I found and discussing this with Simona, who is the curator of the documentary and experimental film collection, and Annike, the film restorer at I, we agreed that we will scan both materials and we will use the AV, so the original material we had, and then complete the rest of the film with the print. So then we could still use some of the original material. So we did, sorry, I want to first show you this. No. Okay. We sent for a quote to the laboratory Hive film, specifying what was to be done with the copies, and this included preparation and cleaning that is necessary so that the film is not carrying in any dirt into the digitized image, and also to be sure that there isn't any problem with the machines, with the scanners, and the film doesn't break. We also asked for a test scanning, which was 4 shots of the beginning of the original material, so the AV reel, which we compared with the same shots scanned in the scanner at the collection center, because we wanted to see which was the better way to go. This resulted, we went with the one at high film because the response was way better in the low lights mainly. We had more details, so we chose to do that. We also asked for the 2K scan of the AV copy, the 2K scan of the print copy, the digital color correction, the digitization of the stripe sound, the sound restoration, and a new sound tape in 16mm coming from that digitized and restored audio in order to also preserve it physically as well, and not only digitally, the restored audio. And finally, the digital files to be delivered after the whole process. So meanwhile, we were waiting for the budget response. I dived into making that extensive damage report that I showed you here, which basically, I'm not gonna go into the numbers, but it showed me that the work to be done, since we didn't want to clean it excessively because of the context of the film, we didn't want to make a pristine image. We just wanted to take out any big things that could be super distracting. So having that in mind and the results of the reviewing, it shouldn't be too hard to like super long work. So I'll go to the digitization was carried out, as we decided, in high film. In the choice scanner, they use mainly for small format film. After this, I did the digital restoration with Diamant, that's the name of the software, and it was 4 days, and I was trying to focus on removing the biggest things and most distracting things, which is sometimes a bit hard to not get lost in all the things that you can correct there. But it was very, very nice work. And here you can see some comparison of some things that I took out. For example, that blue mark. Here, this very big smudge. And this one, very nice. And after the digital restoration, we proceeded to the color correction in high film with Simona, the curator, and a team who works with, he does a lot of things in high film related to digitized film, and he was our operator for the grading. We were using the print copy as a reference at this point, and each shot we will compare to how we were seeing the shots in the real film in a table we had there in the same room, to help us make the final decision about how to grade each one. And after this, we did they did some stabilization in high film, and the materials were delivered back to I. And this was the whole restoration process. Also, any details we can talk now in the Q&A. Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, something that was kind of implicit there, but we didn't say, this is the very premiere of the restoration. So that's something to highlight. So before opening the Q&A to the audience, I have a question. And basically, the question is, why now? And now I'll explain a little bit what I mean with this. Of course, Rommy, you pointed out that I has already focused on some films from that time, and this particular kind of films with the Amsterdam Stadsjournaal, and of course with the Cinemin collection coming in the archive relatively recently. But now you are, or the whole curatorial team actually is starting a bigger project from that period. So what I'd like to hear a little more from you is why now in this scope, but wait a second, because now I'm going to also on a more personal level, why for Martine and Carolina, because these were also parts of your final project during the traineeship. What was for you the appeal to focus on this specific time and this kind of films? That's my question.
Okay, I will start. Why now? It has two reasons. First of all, we talked about the second circuit besides the bioscope circuit that was already existed in the 20s and 30s and 40s. So we did also research to other kind of infrastructures besides the big cinema infrastructure in the Netherlands. For example, in the 30s, there was a lot of Catholic films and a lot of socialistic films which were also screened outside. So it's also a long tradition. So that was one point. So there is always that tradition that beside the official film culture, there is a second film culture. So there's a kind of, not a development, but that was there always. Secondly, of course, it's the more social critical or the other approach, the other way of working with films. As I said, we started maybe in 2012 with asking someone to do research to Cineclub Vrijheidsfilm. Problem is, we don't have those films in our collection. They're the collection of another institute. And that's also a point which is important, that we now outside the boundaries of what I is. Sometimes we look at film and film history most of the time really from the tradition, from the cinema and from what is produced. Now we're also talking about why was it made and where was it shown and why was it screened there. And that is something which I think developed over the last couple of years, that there is much more interest in a much more broader way in collections, because I think partly because it's digitized, we can go to other people, show it there, and also all archives are digitized, so it's easier to have a kind of institutional working together. And maybe there are two important why now is firstly because with Floris Paalman from the University of Amsterdam, he started the project in the investigation, the collection of Cineclub, and we did it in our house because the archive where it is, Institute for Social History, doesn't have the equipment to do it there. And secondly, it was also a discussion within our team of curators to look another way to our collection. We were divided for the last 10 years, maybe in one of the curators was looking for experimental film, the other was looking to silent film, to amateur film, and now we said, okay, maybe we should look at it in another way and open up the archive and look at in the corners, or look at other places and not with the view we have already done for a long time. It was also maybe not a demand, but it's sometimes the situation, society has changed and does ask other questions to archives. So I think it's maybe a long answer, but it has different grounds why we did it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it really stemmed from the period, the previous parts of the traineeship that I was working on. I had the incredible privilege to work with all of the amazing curators here at I, and working on different projects with them. And since Rommy knew I was very interested in female filmmakers, he had asked me to look into female filmmakers from the 1970s and the 80s. And I had the idea of sort of mapping out the structures, how they were working together, in which collectives they were involved, how they were meeting each other at festivals, how it was internationally. Like it was very ambitious, especially for 4 weeks. So I'm still working on that. But when I was looking at all of these films, I was seeing often noticing that I was the first person in like 10 or 20 years who was watching them. I was just struck with how incredibly urgent they were and how they just needed to be seen, how they needed to be discussed. I saw films by the incredible Hilly Molenaar, which she made about abortion. And I think it was right around the time when in the United States the Supreme Court had made its decision, and I was like, people need to watch this film. This can change people's point of view. And while I was researching these female filmmakers, of course, I stumbled on the filmmakers who were working on Amsterdam Stadsjournaal. I started reading about them. I started watching the films and noticed that in 2024 it would be their 50th anniversary of the founding of Amsterdam Stadsjournaal. And I just thought, let's start now. Let's start researching. Let's start working on digitization so we can do something incredible in 2024 and do film screenings, maybe do an exhibition, a publication, anything's possible. Let's start now. That was the idea.
Yeah, for me, hi. So for me, of course, related to what I was interested already when I was doing my film preservation studies, which also is about just video evidence, basically social struggles. And honestly, chance played a big part because when we started our traineeship, we had our day with different curators as an introduction, and our day with Simona, the curator of this collection, was showing us a bit of this film in the viewing tables, and I was completely interested by it. And then when the end of the traineeship was coming, and I knew I had to have like a final project somehow, I knew I wanted to a digital restoration from beginning to end. And I remember that this film was there, and I asked around, and it was also in interest for the curators to be restored, so it was perfect. All of this. Also, I felt it's a very specific thing that I wouldn't have come to if I weren't here. So it also brought me a bit more together to Dutch culture and how it was in the 80s and this specific subculture, of course.
Thank you. So let's see if there are questions from the audience. Also, in case Barbara Den Huyl would like to say anything, please feel free. But yeah, there's a microphone. I don't want to put you on the spot, but since we have you, we'd love to hear.
No, I'm curious and also surprised. I heard it only this afternoon that the film was shown, and I'm curious to see the digital version, and it's also a big moment when you see the past and everything has happened, so we will see.
Thank you very much. The fact that you heard it only today, we owe you a lot of apologies for that. It's due to a misunderstanding. You should have been invited a long time ago, but there was a big misunderstanding. We are very honored to have you here and to be assisting to the premiere with us. Let's see. Other questions?
I just heard restoring is about decision making, and the interesting part to me is who makes the decision, especially with a film like this, where the director still is alive and you could use this background information. I'm just curious, how does the decision process take place? Can you evolve in that?
Well, in general, of course, we always reach out to filmmakers, DOP, and producer, and I think there has been contact also in this case. Also, informations like Carolina showed us that grading document. It's really a document that reports what were the decisions made at the time. Because let's also keep in mind that involving the directors and DOP and people involved 30 years later, it's very crucial, but it sometimes can also lead to creating a new version. So it's very important also to be able to relate to actual technical documents from the time, especially when you get into a digital restoration, because as Carolina can attest, you can go much farther with digital tools than what was possible when films were made. And maybe, Carolina, you want to say something more specific in the day-to-day decisions that are made.
Yeah, so during the process, the decision, I mean, of course, we will discuss everything, but for me, like Simona, the curator of the collection, and Anike, the restorer of the eye, were the final, they had the final word. And yes, I did try to get in contact with Barbara. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So yeah, that's how it went.
Any more questions? There is one completely to the other side.
My question is, I think, for Rommy, because I'm very interested in the alternative circuit of films. And I believe you talked about it coming about from the magazine's Screen. Can you tell something about that, how that came about?
Screen was a magazine which was started from students from the Film Academy. 4 years ago, before that, Scope was started with another generation of students which were much more looking at American cinema, at French cinema, Nouvelle Vague. And Screen fit in very well with what was happening at the last part of the 60s, when there was another approach to film, and they were much more into the Marxistic theories. They were looking at film as a kind of also economical values of film, how what they say the imperialistic way of Hollywood made it into a kind of global world where money was the most important thing, and they were looking at film to be also of value for people in smaller communities, or they said, part of what they said is that, of course, when you make a film and it has a value, have a value for everyone, it becomes kind of mediocre and becomes kind of too big for small audiences, or for not having an answer for everyone in specific countries or specific parts where it was shown. So what Screen wanted was to have another way of addressing people they wanted to reach with film. So they saw film as a kind of, not a kind of big audiences and entertainment, but also a kind of using the film as having contact with a specific audience, with specific meanings, with not only critic, but also with artistic values. And I think the biggest part and most interesting part of Screen is, of course, that it fit in with a total different way of showing films and using films also, which was part of already existing culture of the Cineclub Vrijheidsfilm, who used film as to make people aware. So I think Screen tried to find a more a theoretical foundation for what was already happening within those culture of showing films which were about, for instance, the war in Vietnam, about pollution, about what was going on in the third world, and making people aware. So I think what Screen did in that way was more or less being more on the theoretical side of this the whole development, where there already was a kind of activistic part, and Screen tried to write about it in a more film economical or film political or film theoretical way, but it was part of a far broader movement that was going on, and especially in Germany already you had the communal kinos where you were showing other kind of films. In France you had also the same kind of development, and of course in the United States. So it was part of a much broader thing they brought partly to the Netherlands, and partly they tried to adjust it to our special film culture, which was of course the cartel of the Nederlandse Bioscoopbond. And they just wanted to have a second circuit. And part of that second circuit is, of course, that they, at that point, had also the production. So it was a kind, in that way, with having production and screening in your own hand, in the free circuit, you could have your own movement. You could address the people you wanted outside the existing film world. So what Screen wanted was, and what they all wanted in that time, was to have the freedom to show those films without the interference of the big film companies who were only interested in making money. I'm not really theoretical involved in Marxist theory, but that's what I wanted.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Yes, there is one back there. Randy?
Sorry if I missed this. Was it filmed on reversal film or?
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Great, thank you.
This was really a quick one, so we have time for one last question. Here we have a question from Link.
Can you pass the mic? Thanks.
So you explained a little about the alternative circuit. Is there anything known about where this specific film has been screened? Was it also screened outside of Amsterdam?
You know it? Yes, it was screened outside Amsterdam. Of
course.
course.
In smaller cinemas or?
In film houses, I think mostly, because
yeah, I didn't really look, because I looked into Amsterdam Stadskanaal, and this film was later, so I don't know exactly. But when I was researching the film now, I did see that in recent years, it has also been screened a bit more. It was shown at IFFR a few years ago. It was shown at Cavia. So people are still very interested in showing them also in these spaces.
But mostly those films, I don't know exactly for this film, but they were screened in the film houses. That was the free circuit where it was screened, but also, as we already told, it was screened on school. Films could be screened on schools during manifestations. Something nice or not nice about, for instance, squatter films. There was a film made about Coronation Day, which is called Koninkrijk voor een Huis, a kingdom for a house. It was made of that day, in the inauguration day, and it was financed by the VPRO and VARA. And they didn't dare to show it because it shows where it was too sensitive politically to show it on television. So you see that then they were losing the sympathy. Before that day, squatting was really something which was interesting for a big audiences. They thought they invested it in sending that money, which was about what was happening on Coronation Day. And after the film was made and the big riots of Coronation Day, they didn't dare to show it on television, so it had to be the third circuit. So the screening, I think, of those films depends a lot on maybe also the moment. I know from Where the Reds Are King that I think you already started also negotiations with television. Is that right, Barbara? Yes. and it wasn't shown for. It didn't work out. And
when I started the film, the VARA was interested. And when they saw the werkkopie, they overgeven. They became ill.
Yeah. And it was too sensitive, or it was because it was against...
They didn't like the person. They said they are stinking from the screen.
Okay.
And they didn't pay 1 cent.
Okay, so...
And still I'm waiting for... but this film, it has grown to a kind of a cult film.
Yes.
I don't know, here, there, everywhere, on the strange moments it peeps up. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I know it for the other film, From a Kingdom, From a House. Then it wasn't shown on television when there were a lot of video copies going around in the squatter screen. I was then studying architecture, and we showed it a lot of times in Delft. So it became another kind of circuit.
Maybe you knows it better, but I thought I have seen it on television.
Not in those days, because it was screened later on television. Maybe.
But that film is more dull.
It's another film. It's a totally different.
Yeah,
film.
but they try to show squattering is not so bad.
Yes,
and I don't like.
No, but I think
it's
very nice when you see a lot of squatter films. They all have a different. Sometimes you look at a film and it's like if they are giving a course in how to deal as a squatter with the police or with authorities. Your films give a kind of insight who the squatters are, and I think there's a lot of difference between all those squatter films. It's a kind of genre in itself.
Yeah, okay.
Can I maybe just add one more thing? Is there time? Because I don't know exactly about waar de Raadse Koning zijn, but at I we do have the archive of Amsterdam Stadsjournaal, the paper archive, and all of the films as well. And the thing that makes the paper archive so interesting is that a lot of documentation is preserved about exactly this thing about where these films were shown, how many times, because they were organizing all of these discussions after, which were often also accompanied by someone from the collective itself. We even have reports of the screenings, what was discussed, who was there, what were the arguments. So there is a treasure trove of information that could be super interesting for analysis, and it's just all waiting in the archive to be explored. So there we go.
Great. And on this note, I think we need to wrap up. So thank you very much, Rommy, Martine, and Carolina. Thank you to Barbara Den Huil to be with us today. Thank you all, in particular to the This Is Film students and to everybody here today and those who have followed the series this year. I hope to see many of you for Meet the Archive on June the 3rd or at the International Conference right after that, or next year for the new series of This Is Film, Film Heritage in Practice. I'd like to conclude with a big thank you to the booth and to our producers, Anna Dabrowska and Tessa Jansen, and of course to Eleni Zialli, who is the coordinator of academic activities, and she's This Is Film wouldn't happen without her.